Thank you for downloading this episode of the Physicians Gallery podcast. We have expanded our gallery. It's free to visit with no need to book a ticket. Over the next few months, we'll be exploring some of the fascinating objects we now have on display, from alchemical scrolls and battlefield medicine at Culloden to bloodletting and homeopathy. Please support us and help us to reach new audiences by liking, following, or leaving a comment on whatever podcast platform you are listening on. And please do pay a visit to our gallery when you're next in Edinburgh. We hope you enjoy the podcast. So welcome to the podcast. My name is Daisy Cunynghame and I am the Physicians Gallery's Heritage Manager.
And I am Rachel Forrest, and I am the Physicians Gallery's Heritage Engagement Coordinator.
And our object today is a new treatise of artificial wines.
Ooh, that sounds very interesting. Also sounds like I don't really know what you're about to say.
That's what I'm going for. So this book is on display in our current exhibition, Hooked 500 Years of Addiction, and that runs until the 13th of February 2026. So if you want to see it, stop by before then. So this book is written by William Yarworth. It was published in 1690, and it is a very well suited topic for a podcast because it is not very visual at all. It is all text, no pictures, so you are not missing anything visual by listening to this. It is quite a small book. It's about the size of a smartphone. It has a very, very long title. Book titles in the 1600s and 1700s were sort of like a table of contents. So you didn't have a nice book jacket with an overview on the back. Instead, you had an incredibly long book title. I did think about writing the whole thing down and reading it out, and then I thought that's the point where everyone's going to turn off. So I'm not doing that, but I counted the number of words, and there are 103 words in the title of the book.
And a title! That's ridiculous.
Not including the footnote, because this title actually has its own footnote.
I've never heard of a book that has a title with a footnote.
I love it. The footnote is, "Drink no longer water, but use a little wine for thy stomach's sake, and thy often infirmities." So bold statement
Yeah.
there. Don't drink water, only drink wine.
Only drink wine.
We're starting strong.
Read this really long, well, I'm assuming it's a very long book because it has a very long title.
It's reasonably long, but you get a sense of it quite quickly. I'm about to say a word that I've never said out loud before, so I can only apologize for how I'm going to pronounce it. But it also gives the author's job description, and he was a spagyrical physician and a philosopher by fire. And I've never said the word spagyrical, and that may well not be how you say it.
I don't know what that means.
Well, I didn't until I looked it up, which both spagyrical and philosopher by fire seem to mean pretty much the same thing, which is they say that basically they demonstrate that he's an alchemist. That's what spagyrical means.
Ah, okay, and that makes sense. Philosopher by fire makes sense with alchemy.
And actually making wine, because, early alchemy, early chemistry, there wasn't a lot of other things happening in laboratories at that time. Really, the research was sort of chemistry, and chemistry was mostly used for alchemy, but also could be used for making wine.
But instead of using natural minerals, they're using grapes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a lot about William Yarworth. He was a Dutch physician. He was, as we just said, he was an alchemist. He arrived in England around the 1690s. And he died in 1715, but we don't know when he was born. And yeah, there's a lot of gaps. He was buried in a Quaker burial ground, which suggests he may well have been a Quaker, but we don't have any other information to back that up. He definitely worked with Isaac Newton, the mathematician and alchemist. He definitely did some work for him or with him. Some of Yarworth's chemical preparations were sort of following Newton's directions and helping with his research, but we don't know much more than that. So Yarworth wrote a lot of stuff. He wrote some, very mystical stuff, unsurprisingly, under the pseudonym, I'm also going to mess this up, Cleidophorus Mystagogus.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I'm going to, so many elements of that I've got wrong, I'm sure. Very alchemical, very mysterious.
He sounds like a magician.
I mean, basically, early alchemy it's a fine line. But yeah, it means apparently means, and just gonna say this because I found it out somewhere because I don't know either Greek or Latin. I was gonna say well, not at all, but it apparently means key bearer or and keeper of secrets. So yeah, pretty mystical.
Wow.
But then you have this book, which we're talking about, which is much more practical. And he wrote a couple of books about alcohol. He wrote one about brewing, where he talked about something called double beer, which apparently normally when you're making beer, you steep the grains in water, but he steeped the grains in beer. So he thought it made it twice as strong. So it was beer made from beer instead of beer made from water.
Beer made from beer. And could you have triple beer? Could you have beer made from beer made from beer?
Oh, you probably could.
Why didn't you think of that?
He also, and this is when you start getting the sort of mysticism coming in, he said that this process also made it sweeter because the malts, this is a quote, hunger was satisfied by the beer. Like, what does that mean? Who knows?
Is he saying to people that they don't need to eat?
No, I think it's the malt's hunger. I think it's the malt's hunger is satisfied.
Right.
But I don't know that because the way that he wrote made it very difficult to understand. Okay. Very alchemical of
Mm.
him. But he also said, and I don't know the science to back this up, but it makes a lot of sense that part of the reason that this invention was important was, this is a quote, being thus brewed may be transported to the Indies, remaining in its full goodness, whereas the single soon corrupts and sours. So it's also apparently an aid to preservation to do this.
Okay. Well, maybe he's onto something there then.
And if it worked, given the kind of time that he's writing and the sort of era of kind of colonialism and empire and things, then inventing a beer that could easily be transported around the world was probably a pretty good boon.
Yeah. So why is beer not brewed using this method anymore? Why do we not use double beer?
I mean, we need an expert in the room. I am not that person. Maybe the things that he's saying weren't actually true.
Maybe.
But anyway, that's all a bit of context. This book that's on display and that we're talking about is specifically about artificially aged wine. So just to say there's two different types of artificial wine. There is wine which is artificially aged, and there's wine which is artificial altogether, as in it's not real wine. So, aging wine is thought to improve the taste, the smell, and the color. There are lots of factors in why a wine ages better than another wine, the grape, the region. Sometimes people think that all wine is improved by aging, and that isn't true. It's only certain wines from certain grapes that are actually improved by this process. And right back to ancient Greece, people were artificially aging wine, and they talked about new wine and old wine as a way of distinguishing it. But they typically use smoke or heat. The Greek physician Galen thought that artificially aged wine was less good for your health or even damaging to your health than kind of naturally aged wine. So the idea that it's sort of suspect has been around for a very long time. But like we were just saying about beer, aged wine became very important because it traveled better. So, wine that was aged or fortified by adding sort of a spirit like brandy would survive much better on long journeys. And that's part of the reason, at least, why particularly the English are associated with things like port and sherry. These were drinks that would travel that you could drink, when you were out doing colonial things, in a way that sort of simple or unaged wine would not do. So yeah, it acted as a preservative. But that's aging wine. There's also just fake wine, and that's something that Yaworth is very into. So there seems to be, this is my new exposure to the world of the history of wine, but there's a lot of debate over what was natural wine. Some artificial wine recipes didn't have any wine in them at all. But some of the ones that were described as being artificial were fully wine. There was nothing that wasn't wine in them. But because they were a composite of different wines mixed together of different ages, some people who were real snobs about it said like, "Oh, that's not a proper wine," which to me it seems like it is wine.
So mixing the dregs of like 5 wine bottles together would be classed as an artificial wine.
Yeah, I mean, I would class that as maybe nasty, but like not
Yeah.
necessarily artificial.
It's a terrible wine concoction, but it's real wine.
But there's a lot of, sort of classism and so on in here. Some people said adding water to your wine made it artificial wine. There were tests. So if you put an egg in your wine, if it sank, then the wine was adulterated. Again, I'm not convinced by this.
What, is that not just about the age of the egg?
Look, I'm not saying I'm. These are not. None of this is recommendations from me. Now, I went through Yaworth's book and made a list of some of the things that he used to make artificial wine, and I'm going to read it out now. So, molasses, sugar, cider, lime, raisins, milk, cloves,
Oh,
honey. Which one was it? Was it milk? was
it was milk. Why is there milk in the wine?
I'm gonna keep going. We've got ginger, pepper, raw flesh, and pigeon dung.
What?
You thought milk was bad?
I really thought the milk was bad, but raw flesh and pigeon dung in wine.
Yeah, yeah.
Raw flesh of what?
It just says raw flesh.
So any raw flesh?
I'm guessing, yeah.
Oh, that okay.
Yeah, it's an alarming list. There's a lot of leaves which you would expect, mint, rose leaf, things like that. A lot of fruits, gooseberry, blackberries, raspberries, things like that. The one, I mean, it's not as bad as raw flesh or pigeon dung, but the one I object to is coriander because I do think it tastes like wet laundry and I don't want that in my drink.
No, I mean, I'm funny about coriander in a salad,
Yeah.
so not in wine. The other one that was a bit suspect was pepper.
Yes. Maybe in a tiny, tiny dose, maybe a tiny amount.
Mm. And I mean, the milk's not okay. That's not okay at all.
I don't think he's drinking it himself. I think if you were making an artificial wine for yourself, you're putting in cherries, blackberries, sugar. I think when you're putting in pigeon dung, it's for someone else.
Yeah, like, kind of a scale of how much he doesn't like people. Someone gets the raw flesh and someone gets the pigeon dung.
Yes. And for some reason, right at the very back of the book, after all of this, there's a couple of pages on how to make chocolate cake. He also has a step-by-step guide on how to make the perfect cup of tea. His top tip is use spring water, like running water, spring water apparently makes the nicest cup of tea. But I'm not sure this is a man I trust because he's just fed me pigeon dung. So, and I suppose though, his footnote at the start that said, drink wine, not water. We are at this point we're talking about the 1690s. We are in a period where there isn't good sanitation, where unless you boil the water, it is pretty dangerous, and that might well be a reason for spring water because that's running water, and running water is, generally speaking, safer than stagnant water. So a lot of this, the wines and the beers at this time are incredibly weak by comparison to what they would be now. And so a lot of the time, just the process of fermentation and preparation and distillation gets out some of the things that otherwise might kill you. So there's an underlying logic to artificial wine, which is kind of going, well, it's not really wine, but it is preparing your drink in a way that maybe is safer than just drinking water.
Yeah, unless you put raw flesh and pigeon dung in it.
Yeah, once you put in pigeon dung, you're kind of cancelling out all of the preparation that kept the bad things out. I'm going to be brave and bold and go ahead and say there was probably something even then that wasn't healthy about pigeon dung. Controversial.
Very controversial.
Thank you for listening to this Physicians Gallery podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, click like, or leave a positive review or comment. We truly appreciate your support because it helps us reach more people. If you'd like to know more about the Physicians Gallery, our exhibitions and upcoming events, please check out our website and social media pages. Links are in the description for this episode. Thank you.